She was our best friend, and we could always go to her for anything.
Always kind to people.
And even though it was not a good situation, staying in it, hoping that things will change.
At exactly 7:20 a.m. on March 12, 2025, a neighbor in Northwest Houston opened their door to find a man drenched in blood. "Something terrible has happened," he said. Behind him, inside a quiet townhouse on Emma Forrest Street, 32-year-old Kristen Chavez lay dead on her bedroom floor, her skull shattered by a household iron. The man at the door, covered in her blood, hands raised, was her husband and business partner, Chance Zane Chavez. But this wasn't a crime of passion. The timeline tells a different story. Kristen Lee Chavez had spent over a decade building a career in law. At 32, she worked as a paralegal with expertise in contract management and legal research, fields that demanded precision, logic, and an understanding of how systems work. In 2017, she co-founded Nirvana Legal Solutions, a paralegal consulting and notary firm based in Rosenberg, Texas. The Better Business Bureau listed her as CEO and primary contact. On the company's website, Kristen described her vision: blending technology with personalized service to help clients navigate discovery, legal research, and project management. She wrote about redefining what paralegal consulting could be. Her family knew a different side of Kristen. They described her as strong-willed yet selfless, someone with a compassionate heart who loved animals deeply. She owned 4 dogs: Peaches, Luna, Nala, and one whose name went unrecorded in public reports. She considered them family. Her sister Julia would later tell reporters that Kristen was a brilliant, logical person. Her brother Devin called her his ride or die. These weren't just affectionate phrases. They were descriptions of someone who had ambitions that stretched beyond her current position. Kristen harbored dreams of becoming an attorney, of taking the legal knowledge she'd accumulated and applying it in courtrooms, not just in the background. She had everything going for her: a business she'd built from the ground up, professional respect, a family who loved her. And yet, according to those closest to her, Kristen was trapped. Chance Zane Chavez wasn't just Kristen's husband. He was the chief operating officer and co-founder of Nirvana Legal Solutions. Their professional identities were inseparable. The company website listed him as responsible for day-to-day operations and strategic growth. They worked together, built the business together, presented themselves to clients and the Better Business Bureau as equal partners. To the outside world, they were a success story: 2 entrepreneurs building something meaningful in the legal consulting space. But behind that polished facade, family members would later reveal a reality Kristen had concealed for years. According to her mother, Laura Bell, there was a long history of domestic violence in the marriage. Bell told reporters that Kristen had stayed in the relationship hoping Chance would change. She said her daughter always stayed optimistic despite red flags. Kristen hid bruises. She downplayed the abuse. She believed in reconciliation. A Change.org petition launched the day after her death described Kristen as a victim of incessant domestic violence and abuse. More than 11,000 people would eventually sign it, demanding justice and systemic change. The petition emphasized a statistic: someone is abused by an intimate partner every 20 seconds in the United States. Kristen had become one of those statistics, though no one outside her immediate family knew it. Here's what makes this case so important to understand. Kristen never filed a police report. There are no documented 911 calls, no restraining orders, no prior arrests of Chance Chavez for domestic violence. The abuse existed in the private space of their home and marriage, invisible to law enforcement and the legal system Kristen knew so well professionally. Leaving would have meant more than just ending a marriage. It would have meant dismantling Nirvana Legal Solutions, navigating the financial and legal complexities of dissolving a business partnership, potentially losing the professional identity she'd spent 8 years building. Their lives were so intertwined that separation would have required untangling everything: bank accounts, business contracts, shared clients, professional reputation. This is how domestic violence traps victims even when they have resources, education, and legal knowledge. The barriers aren't always physical or financial. Sometimes they're professional, psychological, built from hope and shared history and the belief that things will get better. In early 2025, something shifted. According to prosecutors, Chance Chavez applied for a $1 million loan shortly before the murder. The Houston Chronicle reported this detail during court proceedings, with prosecutor Steve Walsh telling the judge that finances might be relevant at trial. The specifics of the loan application, what it was for, whether it was approved, whether it related to the business or personal debts, were not made public. But the timing is significant. Family members told reporters that in the weeks leading up to March 12th, the couple had been arguing about money and business decisions. The nature of these arguments wasn't detailed in available reports, but financial stress was clearly mounting. When abusers face loss of control, whether from financial collapse, business failure, or a partner's growing independence, violence often escalates. Money isn't just about survival. For controlling partners, it's about power. The loan application suggests Chance was facing some kind of financial pressure point, though whether that pressure directly triggered the murder remains uncertain. What we know for certain is this: less than a month after allegedly applying for that loan, Kristen would be dead, and prosecutors would point to those finances as a potential motive. The morning of March 12, 2025, didn't begin at 7:20 a.m. It began much earlier, in the hours before dawn. Between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., Chance Chavez took the couple's 4 dogs and drove to the Katy Freeway, Interstate 10, which runs west of downtown Houston. Surveillance footage would later place him along that freeway during those early morning hours. He abandoned all 4 dogs on the roadside. 3 of them, Luna, Nala, and the unnamed dog, would be found alive by Good Samaritans over the following days. The family would mount a desperate search, posting on social media, checking local shelters, hoping all 4 had survived. Peaches, the 4th dog, was eventually found dead. The dog's body had been sealed inside a plastic bag. A necropsy was requested to determine the cause of death, and authorities began considering potential animal cruelty charges. Stop right here. Chance didn't take the dogs to a shelter. He didn't drop them at a friend's house or leave them in the backyard. He drove to a freeway before sunrise and abandoned them where they could be struck by cars, lost, or killed. One of them died. These weren't his dogs to love. They were Kristen's. Her family would later emphasize how much she adored them, how she considered them her children. Domestic violence experts point out that abusers frequently harm or threaten pets as a control tactic. It's a way to hurt the victim emotionally, to remove sources of comfort, to demonstrate power. Animal cruelty is a known red flag for escalating violence in intimate partner relationships. But there's something else significant about this timeline. Chance removed the dogs from the house hours before he killed Kristen. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rage where he lashed out at everything around him. He specifically took the time to get rid of the animals first, then returned home. By 7:20 a.m., Chance was knocking on a neighbor's door. The neighbor who answered the door that morning saw a man covered in blood. Chance told them that something terrible had happened and asked for help. The neighbor called 911 immediately. When Houston Police Department officers arrived at 5126 Emma Forest Street, a 2-story townhouse in the Oak Forest/Rosslyn Heights area of northwest Houston, they found Chance standing in the doorway. According to the official HPD report, he had his hands raised. Blood covered his arms, his legs, his clothing. Officers detained him and placed him in a patrol car, then entered the home. Inside the bedroom, they found Kristen Chavez lying on the floor, unresponsive. Paramedics arrived and pronounced her dead at the scene. The cause of death was severe blunt force trauma. The weapon was a household clothing iron. Investigators found it broken into 2 pieces near Kristen's body, blood visible on the metal. The force required to break an iron in half during an attack tells you something about the violence inflicted. The bedroom walls had multiple holes punched through them. Blood spatter marked the room. Shards of the broken iron were scattered across the floor. The crime scene suggested a prolonged, chaotic struggle. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences performed an autopsy. Though full results weren't publicly released, preliminary reports documented defensive wounds on Kristen's arms. She had raised her hands to protect herself. She fought back. This is what attempted murder looks like when it succeeds. Not a single blow, but sustained violence. Not a weapon brought from outside, but something grabbed from the house in the midst of the attack. The iron was mundane, domestic, the kind of object you use to press wrinkles out of shirts. Chance used it to kill his wife. After the murder, Chance Chavez didn't run. He didn't attempt to flee the scene or destroy evidence. Instead, he knocked on a neighbor's door and said something terrible had happened. Think about this phrasing. something terrible happened. Not "I did something terrible," not "I hurt Kristen." The passive voice creates distance from agency, as if the violence occurred independently of his actions. When police arrived minutes later, Chance was standing in the doorway with his hands raised, a universal gesture of surrender. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't fight back. Officers detained him without incident and charged him on scene with murder. This immediate surrender, combined with the neighbor interaction, raises questions about Chance's state of mind. Was this genuine panic? Shock at what he'd done? Or was it something more calculated? A performance designed to establish that he wasn't fleeing, that he was cooperating, that he was someone who called for help rather than someone who just committed murder? The timeline supports the latter interpretation. Chance had time between killing Kristen and knocking on the neighbor's door. He could have fled. Houston's highway system would have allowed him to disappear quickly. He'd already proven that morning he knew how to use the Katy freeway for his purposes. Instead, he stayed, covered in blood, and positioned himself as someone in crisis rather than someone who'd caused it. Days later, when Chance was scheduled to appear in court for his first hearing, he refused to leave his jail cell. Authorities had to dispatch a containment squad to escort him. This wasn't cooperation anymore. This was defiance or calculation or breakdown, but it contradicted the immediate surrender at the crime scene. Kristen Chavez's murder fits into a broader, devastating pattern. According to the Texas Council on Family Violence, 205 Texans were killed by their intimate partners in 2023. Of those victims, 179 were women and 26 were men. Harris County, where Kristen lived, recorded 38 intimate partner homicides that year alone. The council's research notes that these fatalities span all ages and demographics. More victims are killed with firearms than any other method, but bludgeoning and strangulation remain common in cases where guns aren't used. Kristen's case, death by blunt force trauma with a household object, falls into this documented pattern. Here's the most important statistic. The Houston Police Department's Family Violence Unit reports that 92% of intimate partner homicide victims had ended or attempted to end the relationship before they were killed. The most dangerous time for a victim isn't during the abuse, it's when they try to leave. But Kristen never reported the abuse. Despite family claims of a long history of violence, there are no police reports on file, no restraining orders, no documented interventions. The legal system never had an opportunity to intervene because it never knew Kristen needed help. This is the systemic failure at the heart of domestic violence. Victims conceal abuse due to shame, fear, hope for change, financial dependence, or, as in Kristen's case, complex entanglement with the abuser's professional life. Laura Bell said her daughter stayed optimistic, believing Chance would eventually stop. This isn't weakness. It's a cognitive trap that abusers weaponize, and it kills. Advocates explain that many victims stay in abusive relationships for exactly these reasons. They minimize the danger. They rationalize the violence. They invest in the relationship, believing that love or patience or therapy will fix what's broken. By the time they recognize the relationship is lethal, leaving has become even more dangerous. Kristen had legal knowledge. She worked in a field that dealt with contracts, rights, procedures. She understood how the system worked. And still, she couldn't escape. That should terrify everyone watching this, because if education and professional expertise don't protect you from domestic violence, what does? The city of Houston officially announced Chance Chavez's arrest on March 13, 2025, releasing a booking photo and confirming he'd been charged with murder in the 176th State District Court. In Texas, murder is typically a first-degree felony, carrying a potential sentence of up to life in prison. A magistrate judge initially set Chance's bail at $250,000. The amount sparked immediate outrage. Kristen's family felt betrayed. A Change.org petition launched that same day, calling for higher bail and demanding that Chance receive the maximum sentence. The petition described Kristen as a victim of systemic failures and argued that the legal system needed to do better. More than 11,000 people signed it within days. On March 17, 2025, Chance appeared in court, or rather, was forced to appear after initially refusing to leave his jail cell. Prosecutor Steve Walsh argued for a $1 million bond, citing the severity of the crime, the alleged domestic violence history, and the financial motive indicated by the loan application. Judge Nikita Harmon agreed that the initial bail was insufficient. She doubled it to $500,000 and imposed strict conditions: electronic monitoring if released, prohibition of alcohol and weapons, and no contact with Kristen's family. Family members and supporters attended the hearing wearing purple ribbons, the symbol of domestic violence awareness, and holding signs with Kristen's name. They wanted her to be more than a headline, more than a case number. They wanted the system to acknowledge what had happened and ensure Chance remained in custody until trial. As of now, the case remains pending. No trial date has been set. Chance Chavez is being held in Harris County Jail awaiting proceedings. Authorities are still considering whether to file additional animal cruelty charges related to Peaches' death, pending the results of the necropsy. Kristen's family continues to advocate. Her mother, brother, and sister have spoken to multiple news outlets, emphasizing that Kristen was brilliant, compassionate, and had dreams she'll never fulfill. They've made it clear they feel the system failed to protect her while she was alive, and they're determined to ensure it delivers justice now that she's gone. But justice, in cases like this, is always incomplete. Kristen is still dead. Her dogs, the animals she loved like children, are scattered or gone. The business she built no longer has its CEO. The life she was supposed to live, the attorney she dreamed of becoming, the future she'd worked toward for over a decade, all of it ended on a bedroom floor in Northwest Houston because the man who promised to love her chose violence instead. The legal process will continue. There will be court dates, evidence presentations, possibly a trial. Chance Zane Chavez will face the consequences of what happened that morning. But no verdict will bring Kristen back. No sentence will undo the years of abuse her family says she endured in silence. No amount of accountability will answer the question that haunts everyone who knew her. Why didn't she leave? The answer is complicated and painful, and rooted in the same patterns that kill hundreds of people every year in Texas alone. Kristen stayed because she hoped, because leaving seemed impossible, because her life was tangled with his in ways that made separation feel like destroying everything she'd built, because the system never intervened, and because by the time the danger became undeniable, it was already too late. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. In Texas, local resources are available through the Houston Police Department's Family Violence Unit and regional shelters. The most dangerous moment is often when you're trying to leave, so please reach out for help in creating a safety plan. Kristen Chavez deserved better. She deserved a system that could see her. She deserved a partner who didn't weaponize her hope.